Hi, my name is Gary Bates. I'm chairman of Seaxe and Sorcery. I'm also the main ref behind our H.M.S system, and of course I play the mage Troy Adius. I'm here today to address a few questions that have been presented to us with regards magic. Now, whilst I'm predominantly going to speak about mages, after all that's what I play, I'm also going to try and give some insight in how the other magic using guilds should act and behave and operate. Now, first off, let's just talk about our main magic using guilds. If we look at the Magic Users Guild, we're divided between mages, elementalists and necromancers. Now, mages, we develop magic and use the power of self. We use that to control the cosmic energies that are around us, to shape it and to give it thought and control it with our minds. We use incantations, we use wands and staffs to help us do this. Our elementalists, on the other hand, they draw on the power from 1 to maybe 3 of the 4 elements: earth, fire, air and water. In very rare cases, some of the more powerful have learned to use all 4 and have even gone on to use spirit, which is the powerful 5th element in our system. Lastly, we have necromancers. They draw on the netherworlds and the realms of the dead. They call upon negative aspects of magic and are not necessarily evil, but lean towards a darker path. Now, beyond that guild, we have the Church of Light, which has now recently been renamed the Unified Church. And they draw their magic and their spells from the divine powers in our system called the Zoni. Now, they have clerics, they have healers, and they have templars. Clerics are the day-to-day leaders of the church, and they lead much of the religious celebration and can also shape spells that have a wide range of uses. Healers, they call upon spells that help others, that stop disease, that knit wounds back together, etc. Templars, who are the military wing of the church, they can use their spells in combat situations, sometimes for negotiation. What's interesting about them is they may also take spells from the mage's spell list. This is due to a deal that was made by the church with an ancient Zoni of magic in the past. Now, outside of those 2 organisations, we have the Druids. The Druids are nature-based magicians or wizards who are in touch with the land itself and draw their power from the world that we live in, the sky, from the sea and from the land. They're in touch with spirits and they have a much more natural feel to their magic. Now, we also have some magic users that don't quite fit into those categories. They are Warlocks, Bards and Assassins. Warlocks are a type of fighter mage. They are skilled in the arts of war, but also have trained in the arts of magic. They tend to draw their spells from the mage spell lists, but also on occasion have been known to also draw their spells from the elementalist spell lists as well. They're not quite as good as a full-blown mage at magic, and they're not quite as hard as a full-blown warrior. The bards, or songmasters, they actually sing their spells and call upon a very old type of magic, a magic that was used to help create the world. They call their spellbook songbooks, and they have to actually sing any spell that they are trying to cast. The last group are the assassins, and at high level, assassins get access to magic that's used for killing and combat. It, again, like necromancy, is borderline evil, and many assassins do in fact give in to their darker sides. Okay, so that's our main types of magic user. Now, some people get a little bit confused in H.M.S between the different types. All of them fundamentally manipulate magical energy to get what they want. Now, in order to do this, they have different ways of learning. Mages, they sit down and they learn from books and from their masters by practicing techniques. And in a weird way, they're almost like modern-day scientists. They write down their spells in spell books, and every mage must have a spell book. Our elementalists are very similar. They too have a spell book, but they actually get inspiration for some of them spells by communing directly with elemental zoni and greater elemental beings. Whether for earth that's gnomes, or sylphs for air, salamanders for fire, or nixies, nymphs, and undines for water. So there's a roleplay element onto how they learn their spells as well. The necromancers are very much like the mages. They learn from dusty tombs, but also by talking to the spirits of the dead. They too need to have a spell book. The church is slightly different. The Unified Church and the other various religious groups in our system have prayer books, and they have to write down the prayers that they know. Now, these aren't everyday common prayers like thanking the Zoni for the sun coming up. These are prayers that invoke a magical response, a divine magical response. Now, the difference here is that a Zoni who feels that their cleric, healer, or Templar has displeased them or not worked in a way according to their ethos can restrict or revoke their spellcasting ability. Druids have a lot more leeway on how they record their spells. They can be recorded on the backs of leaves, on sticks, on staffs, on scrolls, or even in their own version of spellbooks. It's entirely up to the individual druid and should be negotiated with their guild leader and the refs. However, it does have to be in druidic script, and they can use a great deal of imagination when creating their way of recording their spells. As for, I've already sort of touched on the other groups. Warlocks, they use spellbooks just like mages and elementalists. Bards have to have songbooks. Now, what you can do here is use existing songs or nursery rhymes that mirror the effect of the spell that you want to do. So a song about dancing could be used to invoke the dance spell. A nursery rhyme or a lullaby could be used to put someone into a magical sleep. Now, all of the magic users I've mentioned so far, and I've deliberately not mentioned the assassins again, have to say their spells very loudly, and each different guild has a formula for saying their spells. We want magic users in our system to take about 15 seconds of spell casting. Now, during that time, not only do they say the spell, they have to use gestures to pull together the magical energy ready for them to unleash the spell and to have its effect. With regards our mage, if we start with them, they would have to say something along those lines of, by my power and the power of fire, by my power and the power of earth, by my power and the power of water, I call forth, and let's just say in this case, burn. The reason we say the spell component, the spell lyrics 3 times, is because we've worked out that that's roughly 15 seconds. Now, because the mage is using their own power, they can say, by my power, and they're pulling on themselves. We can flesh that out. So, for instance, although I used 3 elements just then, if I was to do a burn spell for Troiadius, I would say something along the lines of, by my power, I call upon the power of elemental fire. By my power, I call upon the power of the salamanders. By my power, I call upon the raw power of fire. Burn! And you have a lot of leeway in the way you say those spell mechanics. You design them with your ref and your guild leader, and then you stick to them throughout. For instance, the church, they might say whilst they're praying, I call upon the power of the Zoni, I call upon the power of the Zoni, I call upon the power of the Zoni, grant me this day this prayer, and then say heal, or cold, or chill. It depends on the spell that they're using. Now, a druid on the other hand, they call upon nature, and they might say something similar to the mages, but change it to, by my power and the power of nature, by my power and the power of nature, by my power and the power of nature. Fawn dart. What's important is that the gestures are exaggerated, can be seen, and mimic pulling in the power. Whether you're calling on the power of yourself, one of the elements, the power of the dead, the power of the Zoni, or nature, depends on what you are. It must, however, last for 15 seconds. It also must be fairly loud. In fact, some of our magic users, particularly those in the church, have to call upon their god, and they must do so with pride. Now, the only exception to that is when loudly casting might get one of their parishioners or the people they're trying to help in trouble. However, again, good clear verbals are necessary. The only exception to this are the assassins. The assassins most certainly do not need to say their verbals very loudly. In fact, it would get them caught and it would get them in trouble. So in fact, they're the only ones who get to whisper theirs, and there is an element of trust involved. Now, once you finish spellcasting, you need to rip a number of spell cards equal to the points that your spell is worth. Now, at the moment, we haven't been using the spell cards, but as of H.M.S. Event 2 2016, they will be coming back. They will be prepared by the magic refs, and then they will be dished out to the guild leaders. Now, you're asking, what if your guild leader's not there? You will be able to go to whoever is the Minister of Guilds on the Council of Seaxe, or you will also be able to go to whoever is representing magic for the Council of Seaxe. Spell cards need to be collected in the morning, and there will be a penalty to the number of spell cards that you get if you turn up late. So, we haven't exactly decided when you'll be able to collect your spell cards, but it'll probably be during the breakfast period and finish just after the Father Bretwald lectures about 10 o'clock. It is important that you collect these, and they will be marked Friday, Saturday and Sunday. This is so that you can't use spell points from the previous day. Now, all magic users, at the end of the day, if they've got any spell cards left, can take their spell cards, and in the case of a mage, they can place the magic into their staffs. And you can collect spell cards that you will be able to tie to your staff and rip as necessary. Now, for every 2 spell points that you have left at the end of the day, you can turn them into 1 stored spell point in your staff. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio. The same for prayers, for clerics, and the same for prayers going into swords for Templars and Warlocks, and also going into daggers for assassins. And pretty much everyone else uses a staff. Now, saying that, you can also sometimes place spell points into wands. Now, a staff can take up to 10 spell points. A wand about this size can take up to 5. Some people have even learned how to put them into amulets or to rings. Usually, these can take 5 or less spell points. Remember, it's still a 2-to-1 ratio going into those objects. Now, after your first event, it is important that you get yourself a spell book or a prayer book or a song book. It doesn't have to be as big or as excellent as mine. It can be much smaller, and like I said, for the druids, it can take all sorts of different forms. Now, the spell books can be used to store your magic runes. It can also be used to write down your spells. And you can be randomly tested by the heads of your guilds to make sure that you know what these runes and what your spells do. That's why I have pictures. For instance, this is sleep, and it also has a story on the other side that goes with and gives me clues and to help me remind me that that's my sleep spell. Now, the spells will be dealt with in a different blog and podcast, and that's because at the moment we're finalising the spells. H.M.S. started in 2001, and when we started we had 5 different types of spellcaster. We simply had mages, we had clerics, templars, healers and druids. We soon added elementalists, and we also then added the necromancers. Now, when we first started, we kept to the same spells for almost 7 years solid, and everyone knew what the calls were, what they meant, what the spell durations were, and it was common knowledge. However, it became evident after playtesting, particularly the necromancer and the elementalist spells, that they were unbalanced. So we went through a period of change. Now, H.M.S. has been running for 15 years, and like I say, for the first 7, the spells weren't altered at all. We then got people to bring the spells into alignment and to start to make them make sense. However, things got a little bit too D&D, and the spell lists bore no relationship whatsoever to each other, and really there was no point in being anything but a mage. So we sat down, and we've been going through the slow process over the last few years of standardising all the spells. By event 2, all of the spells will be fixed. I have no plans on changing any of the rules after event 2 for at least another 10 years. So, as we go on, people will begin to know what is the difference between an apprentice, a journeyman, a master and a grandmaster spell. They will also begin to notice that an apprentice spell from the mages is on a power level to the necromancers, to the church's spells, and to the bards and the assassins. They will also start to notice that there are formulas. Bolt spells do similar things, ball spells do similar things, Wrath spells do similar things. And as time goes on, and as our refs get more and more confident with that, and you as the players do as well, you will discover that they are versatile, but also that each type of magic user has a place within the system. For example, mages have a great deal of diversity. They have a mix of combat spells, utility spells, and spells with very specific functions. Each of the different types of elementalist, with the fire and earth as my 2 examples, fire elementalists are mostly combat. And if you want to play a character that's really into combat and is still a mage, that's the path to follow. Whereas your earth elementalist is there for defense and protection. They're there to keep other people safe. Your necromancers is mostly about having truck with the dead and utilising the properties of the dead and the undead in order to get what they want. Your bards is all about telling a story, all about song, all about remembering the past. They also have a lot of enchantment and charm type spells. Your assassins are very direct. They're about killing, immobilizing a target, allowing them to find their prey. Your church, your cleric, is pretty much the church's version of the mage. They have a lot of commanding and utility-based spells, whereas your Templar opens up a whole realm of combat, killing, defending and attacking. Your healers are very specialist, and they are all about keeping people alive, combating disease, defeating the undead. Now, there's also been a few questions about what happens when you want to go up in levels, and there's also been a few questions about how you go about learning new spells and getting more magic points. Right, after your initial magic points that you get when you create your character, you can spend 50 hours to get either a new spell or a new magic point. Okay, you're also, when you go up a level, so say for instance I was an apprentice and I had 3 apprentice spells and 5 magic points. When I go up to a journeyman, I automatically get 1 journeyman spell and I get a magic point at the same time. So what tends to happen is that a lot of our mages and our clerics and our healers and well, in fact all of our magic users tend to go up levels as quickly as possible without building up a vast repertoire of magic points or spells. Well, hopefully this is going to change, and it might get people to start exploring the need to have those magic points and to have a look at the different spells that are out there. Now again, because the spells have been standardized, some spells have disappeared from spell lists and appeared in others, and some spells have been rewritten completely or had their names changed. In the beginning, most spells were identifiable what they did by their name. For instance, burn sets you on fire, chill freezes you, shock electrocutes you, fawn dart puts a fawny dart in you. So people got the idea of what happened, and even if they weren't really up on the spells, could at least role play the effect. Now, when you become a magic user, you will get all of this explained to you in graphic detail. And if you do have a question, do not be afraid to go to your guild leader and ask them for advice, or one of your fellow mages or magic users who are of a similar level to you. I'm sure that they will be friendly enough to impart their knowledge. If you really are stuck, then come and see me. Myself and my refs after event 2 will all be saying the same thing, and we will be giving the same explanations, and over time that will get embodied in everyone, and people will begin to find out what spells do and be able to do those from memory. More than anything, I want spell casting to be creative, dramatic, seen. I want people to take pride in their spell books. I want people to experiment with their spells. I want people to get involved in rituals, and I want people to get involved in the wider aspects of playing a magic user, as defined by the guild that you join. Well, I hope that has been useful. I will be doing some more specific blogs and podcasts discussing other aspects of H.M.S. and Seaxe and Sorcery. In particular, I'm going to explore magic in a little bit more detail and talk about the basics first, and then we're going to go on to some of the more advanced stuff. Please do not hesitate to contact us by email, and we can be contacted directly at seaxeandsorcery@hotmail.co.uk. You can also contact us through Facebook and through our website, which is www.seaxeandsorcery.co.uk. Please join the forums, use the forums, leave messages on there, ask questions, and do the same with our Facebook site. Okay, this has been Gary Bates, Chairman of Seaxe and Sorcery, Uber Ref of H.M.S, and of course, the one and only Troy Adius. Take care and thank you for listening.